Sasquatch, ghost, dogman, aliens, demons, shadow people, skinwalkers, even the Fae. Our universe is vast, dark, and wrought with infinite unexplained phenomena. We have tasked ourselves with assisting humanity in finding the keys to unlock the mysteries that abound in and around our world. What we intend to reveal behind the curtain of darkness may very well invoke those fears long tucked away in our memories. We will meet that fear head on as we strive to shine the light of understanding on these phenomena. The goal is to arm you with the power of knowledge to confront and even combat these entities. We welcome you to join us on our quest. We are Midwest Night Watchers.
Hi everyone, welcome to Piercing the Veil. We got a little pre-Halloween special going on, and so glad we've seen everybody in chat popping in. And we have a special guest, Steve Stockton. And if you didn't know, Steve has a big, vast array of videos and stuff on his platform on YouTube and all over. And he has 13 Past Midnight, and he has ATM Among the Missing. So go check those out on YouTube. And he's also doing a radio show on Clyde Lewis's Ground Zero radio network. So check that out. Who knows, you might even hear us someday on there. So we'll go ahead and get started and get some spooky stories and some scary tales going on. And we'll bring up our great friend, Steve Stockton. Hi, Steve.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Thanks for being here tonight.
Oh, happy to be here. It's an honor and a privilege. You guys are awesome. I love what you're doing here.
Well, your stories are awesome.
Thank you.
Yep. We need to tell everybody the last time you were on, we were talking about fae folk and fairies, and we had some activity in the room where Jane happens to be sitting right now. So everybody keep an eye out behind Jane to see if they see anything tonight while we're doing our live show here.
Yeah, our woo feathers started with Steve, so let's see if they show up again.
Yeah, I remember that. Let's see if it comes back.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that you're ready to tell us some good stories, Steve. What kind of
I've got a few that are Halloween themed, and what better time of year to tell them, right?
Right.
So I know everybody's having Halloween specials and special guests. I'm sure you're busy doing everything. So I want to thank you for taking the time out to be on our show.
And I want to say early happy birthday, because your birthday is coming up.
Oh.
Yep.
Happy
Halloween.
Birthday, Steve.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
And my dog Mulder, we celebrate his birthday then too. He was a rescue. Don't know exactly when he was born, but we just made his birthday Halloween too. So that way we'll have a live stream on Among the Missing Halloween night with celebrating my Mulder's birthday.
Oh, nice.
All right. Well, happy birthday.
When I retired, it was our doggie's birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Oh. All right. Is everybody in chat ready for some spooky stories? We're just going to let Steve go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wind me up and let me go, huh? Well, there was one in particular that I was thinking of. It happened on Halloween night in East Tennessee when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I'd been out trick-or-treating and then went back to a friend's house. And then coming home, I had to walk the road. It was about an old country road, probably about 1.5 miles, 2 miles to my house. And it was easier to take a shortcut through the woods, but those woods are dark, and I didn't want to brave it on Halloween. So I'm walking down the road there. It was probably between 11 and midnight. We'd done our trick-or-treating and been up to a little mischief too. I may tell some of that later on. Hope the statute of limitations ran on that stuff already. But I was coming down the road. I thought that'd be the less scary version. And I see somebody coming down the road smoking a cigarette. I can see the glow of the ember on the end of the cigarette. It would flare up. I thought, no, it's just, somebody. That the road dead ended into the lake. And that was a notorious hangout for teenagers and their dates and stuff down there. And I see the cigarette coming, and I kind of stepped over. It was in a curve right there, and it was coming up the high side of the curve, and I stepped down into the lower side of the curve. And when it gets closer, I can still see the cigarette, but there's nobody there. I mean, it's flaring up a little bit like somebody's puffing on it, and I can see smoke coming off the cigarette. But whatever it was smoking it, I couldn't see it, and I couldn't see it exhale. So it was whatever it was. And I stopped and stared at the thing, and it just went right by me, just bobbing along, a lit cigarette. It was either the most amazing practical joke ever, or there's a ghost or something walking through there smoking a cigarette. I stood and watched it go out of sight. And said that road dead ended into the lake. Prior to that, it ran down into the river before the Tennessee Valley Authority dammed Clinch River up and made Melton Hill Lake there. And a lot of people had drowned down there. So I was thinking, Halloween night, the veil is thin. Headed down to the lake one last time or to revisit where they shuffled off this mortal coil and having a cigarette on the way. That's probably the strangest thing that I ever personally experienced on Halloween night. Like I said, we were into a lot of mischief, and we would scare ourselves and go into scary places. There was an old abandoned graveyard near there, but that was a one-off, and I was the only one that saw it. That kind of strange. I don't know.
That is strange.
What do you make of that?
Wow.
Who knows what lurks, in the shadows. I mean, we keep talking about, our show, Piercing the Veil. We keep saying the veil's thinning. I mean, there's just all kinds of dimensions and other entities that can cross over, or we can bring them in. I mean, it's just crazy.
And that whole area there where I grew up, there was a lot of strangeness down there. I had several encounters in that area. There was a ditch that was one side of our property. That was a property line. And I found out much later in life that had been the old stagecoach road through the area dating back to Revolutionary War times, and probably before that. A lot of strange occurrences there. Had something come up out of that ditch and chase me out of the woods one time, but whatever it was, I couldn't see it.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And I was 8 years old at the time, and I was up there just messing around. We had 26 acres out in the country, very rural East Tennessee. And so it was a great place to be a kid. I was raised as an only. My only sibling, older brother, was 17 years older than me. And so I spent a lot of time just by myself, playing by myself. I went around to other kids and started kindergarten. And I'd been up like peering down in the edge of that ditch, didn't see anything interesting, and it turned around to go back down the hill about half mile from home. And I heard something in the leaves down in the ditch. And I turned around and looked. And guys, whatever that was, it came up over the lip of that ditch. It was kicking up leaves. There was branches a lot higher than my head that were being knocked out of the way. I could feel the ground shake. Whatever this thing was, it was heavy, but I couldn't see it.
Oh, wow.
And so once the paralysis broke, which just took a few seconds, I took off back down the hill. I was crying and screaming. I was making such commotion that my mom came out on the back porch to see what I'd done this time. I went right past her, went in the house, and I think I hid under the furniture, hid under the bed or something like that. Well, she finally got me calmed down. And about that time, my dad got home from work, and my brother, who by that point he was married, lived out on his own, had a family, and he'd stopped by too. And I told them what I'd seen, or what I hadn't seen actually. They went back up there and looked, and they could see where something had kicked up the leaves and where the branches and little trees and things were disturbed, but no evidence of anything. And they asked me, they said, was it a bear? No. Was it a deer? No. They named all these animals, and I grew up in the edge of the Smokies, spent a lot of time in the Smokies. I was familiar with all those animals. It wasn't anything that I could see. Well, flash forward 7 years later, I'm 15 years old. We're getting ready to move from that area. We'd sold the farm there and moving into a subdivision several miles up the road where I was going to go to high school. And I was just out kind of taking one last look around since we wouldn't be living there soon. And looking at all my old childhood haunts. There was a little cave that I used to like to go in. There was a bluff that I liked to get under. Had a stone fire pit, places that I camped and built tree forts and things. And I walked back up there to that ditch. That's really the first time I'd been up there. Then once I tried to use a friend of mine for bait, I had him go stand by the ditch and I stood down the hill and nothing bothered him. But I'd walked back up there just looking around. I was like, I wonder what that was that scared me when I was a kid, just to myself, kind of chuckling about it. And turned to walk away. And I hear a familiar noise, something in the leaves in the ditch. Same exact thing. I turned around, whatever it was, came up over the lip, was headed straight for me. And I didn't run screaming and crying that time, but I didn't waste any time getting out of there. And then flash forward another, that was the last time I've been to that ditch. That's been 45 years ago almost. But flash forward another 6 years, I was working at a place in West Knoxville, Cedar Bluff area. And a guy that I worked with invited me to a little house party at an apartment complex down the road. I only knew him from work, didn't really know him at all. And I went with him. And it was in October, around Halloween, I think. It was kind of an impromptu Halloween party. And some girls there dug around under the I think it was behind the couch or under the couch, came out with a Ouija board. And, there's four of them messing with it. They're never going around the room asking people questions. They got to me and I thought, I got a good one for you. The only thing I said, what scared me when I was a child with that incident in mind, other than my parents and my brother, nobody knew that story at that time. I certainly didn't tell it to the guy that I worked with, and he was the only one there that I even remotely knew. And sure enough, the board does its thing. And then it spells out Sprite. It's spelled water sprite. And they were like, they looked at me and I just shrugged. And they were joking. Oh, it wants some water. It wants a Sprite. It's thirsty. Give it something to drink. Ha, ha, ha. And then they moved on to some other people. But I filed that away. And my next day off, I went to the big library downtown. This was a couple of decades before the internet. And asked the reference librarian and said, what can you tell me about a water sprite or a water spirit? She went back in the stacks, came out with some books, and she had a book on elementals. And there were two creatures in there. One was a naiad, that was a guardian of the water, and a dryad, which was a guardian of the forest. And the curious thing about this place, there were 7 natural springs there. 6 of them flowed out of hillsides, and one of them was an artesian spring. They all flowed together into a bigger creek, which went down to the lake, or previously the river. And I thought, what better place for there to be an elemental, a water spirit or a water sprite than where all those springs were. But it didn't like me. It chased me out of there. And if you can believe what the Ouija board had to say, it was a water spirit. So there you go.
Oh, wow.
That's that tale.
Now, you probably got a lot of, or where you lived when you were younger, you probably had a lot of ley lines and stuff like that, the energy in your area.
Yeah, like I said, that whole area, there had been a lot of bloodshed in there, at least during the Civil War and probably prior to that. And in fact, down there in an area we call the Bottoms, which was down the hill from the house, and then you had to cross the creek. My dad had built a little bridge over it. Down the Bottoms there we had a big garden spot down there, and maybe about an acre or two. Rest of it was heavily wooded. And that whole area just fell off. I'd play down there a lot. But once it started getting dark, it seemed really dark down there. And there was times that I would run out of there. So I feel like something was right behind me until I crossed that bridge. And that's one of the myths or legends, is that a ghost can't cross running water. And just that whole area was spooky. Another time we were burning an old tree that had been struck by lightning. And we rolled it over so the other side would catch. And there was a piece of a a bayonet, turned out to be a Civil War era bayonet, just the tip of it that was broken off in that tree. And we
Wow.
found the mini balls and stuff there, found arrowheads there. There, I think a lot of people got ambushed there because that old road that went through there, well, then just down the hill here was all this freshwater creek and all those springs and everything. I think people stopped there to get a drink or water their horses or whatever and got ambushed because if you were up on the ridge above that, you could see down in there what anybody was up to. So there was definitely something down there.
Yeah, when you talked about going across the bridge and stuff, right, reminds me of Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, exactly. That was the feeling. I didn't see any headless horsemen or nobody flung a jack-o'-lantern at me, but it was more of a presence that I could feel. Now, there was a couple of other encounters that I had down there, and I didn't even realize this until I was well into adulthood, probably late 30s, early 40s. I was talking to my dad, and when I would be playing down there in the daytime in the summer, there was a couple of little kids that would come down out of the woods, and they would mess around, play with me, doing whatever I was doing, but they never talked. And they would hang around for a while. Now, they wouldn't go near the creek. I thought maybe they just weren't supposed to or whatever. And then would hear like a bell, like maybe sound like a dinner bell or something, would peal just once, and they would drop whatever they were doing and just take off back through the woods and go up over the ridge and out of sight. And I asked my dad, like I said, I was an adult. I said, who were those little kids that used to come out of the woods when we lived down there that I played with? And he said, your imaginary friends? And I said, no, these were real little kids. There was two of them. They looked like brothers. One was probably 5 or 6 and the other 7 or 8 or so. And I told him the direction that they went, and they went over the backside of that. And he said, well, there's nothing up there. There's a bluff up there that drops off, used to drop off into the river. Now it just drops off into the lake. He said, the only thing that was ever up there on that side, he said, there used to be an old church and a graveyard down there until they dammed the river up and made the lake, and all that's underwater now. And I thought about that. These little kids, because this would have been late 60s, early 70s, they didn't look like kids from that time. I mean, I wore the finest from J.C. Penney's, and had kind of longish hair, kind of a beetle cut. But these little kids had burr haircuts, like a buzz cut. They had little flannel shirts and jeans, like brand new looking jeans. And they were cuffed way up. I mean, like 4 or 5 inches.
Oh,
and
wow.
I know years ago, people used to buy their kids jeans like that. And then the taller you got, your mom would roll that cuff down so they would still fit you for a long time. And in retrospect, I'm wondering if those weren't a couple of kids that had been wiped out by cholera or smallpox or something like that, and they were buried down over that side. And that would explain why they wouldn't ever cross the creek or even get near the water.
Yeah.
And again, didn't think about it at the time. I thought, well, they don't talk. Maybe they can't talk or they don't have anything to say. But they would play around in the woods with me there. And
I was going to ask if you thought the cemetery being underwater or anything had to do with sprites or any kind of apparitions coming out.
It could. Like I said, that whole area, there was an abandoned graveyard that had not too far from there that had graves dating back to the 1800s. Some of the stones were so weather worn, you couldn't read the names on them. And we built a clubhouse in there. We didn't build it over any graves, but right in the edge of it. And you talk about having a clubhouse that other kids will leave alone. Build one in the graveyard. They're like, don't mess with those kids. They've got a clubhouse in the graveyard. And
wow.
And the same road that I saw the cigarette on, that was also the first place I ever saw a full-bodied apparition. That was in the summertime. That was probably September. And I was 6 going on 7. And a car came down the hill. There was an inverted T intersection there, stopped at the stop sign. And from behind the car, I saw a little kid run out and run right across in front of the car. And the driver, it didn't register with him. And I'm thinking, that little kid's going to get hit because that guy didn't even see him. And I don't even know where the kid came from. Ran across in front of the car down into our yard, kind of catty cornered. And if you've ever seen kids that are just basically toddlers, they start running and they don't quite know how to stop, so they'll just fall down.
Right.
Well, the kid did that, and when he fell, he just wasn't there anymore. I didn't take
Oh,
my eyes
wow.
off the spot. Our driveway was 213 feet from the garage to the road. I measured it later on when I was doing BMX sprints. But I was about halfway out in the yard. I saw that. I didn't take my eyes off the spot. I walked right to the spot. The guy in the car, he just looked both ways and then went down toward the dead end into the lake. And I went right to the spot. There was nothing there that I could have mistaken for a kid. No hole that a kid could have fallen into or anything. I even went and got a shovel and dug a hole there to see what I would find. Didn't find anything. And I was talking to Cisco Murdoch from Journey Through the Gate Paranormal Portal podcast about that one night. And she said, you've still got that shovel and you're still digging. And I am. I mean, that was what started me, because it didn't scare me at all. It was just like, what's that? That's not supposed to happen. And never had any insight or awareness or anything on that one. My grandmother on my mother's side, she was a self-proclaimed gypsy witch. I don't know where she got the gypsy part. Because they immigrated over from England, landed in the Cades Cove area, the Smokies. But I'm thinking somewhere back in the lineage, there was some old country that they were from, probably Italy or Romania or somewhere. But she told fortunes, read tea leaves and coffee grounds and animal entrails and that sort of thing. And I asked her about it one time. And she said, well, I tell you, she said, there's things that you're supposed to see that'll mean something. They believed in omens and harbingers and portents and warnings and things like that. And she said, other times you may see something that's meant for somebody else, but you can see it too. It's meant for them. They would understand it. And then she's concluded, so, but sometimes there's things that don't make any sense that may never mean anything to you. Even in retrospect, it just is. Sometimes you just see things. And that was
right.
That was the best explanation I've heard, and that was, a long time ago. She's been dead since 1976.
It's amazing when you get into the hills or the Appalachians, all the rituals and ceremonies and practices they do that we don't necessarily pay attention to out here in the rest of the Midwest or whatever.
Yeah.
We never hear that stuff, but I like watching those stories on YouTubes and stuff about the, granny being a witch or I don't know, a teller or, of the stories, or be able to read your auras and your palms and all that stuff.
Yeah, she could read palms, and she also practiced phrenology, which is pretty much a lost art now, but it was popular back around the turn of the last century. They could tell things about you by feeling the bumps on your head. And I've seen those old ceramic heads with marked off like a palmistry reading thing, but it was the head, and certain lumps on your skull in certain areas meant you were predetermined or predestined to maybe be a certain way or something. But she was very accurate. She had ways of knowing things that she couldn't have known. And she used to scare me.
If I remember right, your grandmother said something about you and when you were born, right?
Yeah, she was present at my birth. My mom was knocked out. That was back when they gave women in labor twilight sleep, which was some kind of drug that just basically put them out of it. I think they've since declared it unsafe. But my grandmother was present at my birth, and she didn't help deliver me as far as I know. She would have. She'd done some midwifery and things. But according to her, I was born with a veil over my face. That was a big thing down south, or a caul, they also call it. All it is, it's the amniotic sac. When I was born, it was still stretched over my head, and they had to cut it away. And she kept that. I don't know what she did with it. I've heard of people framing them and using them as good luck charms and stuff. I hope she didn't make soup or something out of it. But nowadays, the gypsy witch, like I said, I don't know where she came up with that. But these days, they call those women in Appalachia granny witches. And they told fortunes. They knew herbal remedies, and more likely a kitchen witch. I mean, the bowl that she used for scrying on Saturday night might have mashed potatoes in it on Sunday morning. She used whatever she had available. And she had 10 kids, my mom and 9 boys. So I couldn't get away with anything when I was a kid. My mom knew all the boy tricks, but my uncles, they swore that she was every bit as accurate as the Old Farmer's Almanac, and they lived and died by that book. They had
Wow.
it had a hole punched in the corner, and there was a piece of baling twine or something in there, and then it hung on a nail in the kitchen. And whenever they were sitting around after dinner having coffee, they would pull that down and figure out what was good, what, tobacco or corn or tomatoes or what to plant next year and how the hogs were going to do. They had a dairy farm and they truck farm too, produce, tobacco, things like that. But every fall when they slaughtered hogs, she would pick out one that she called hers. And when they slaughtered that one, she would poke around in its entrails with a stick, and she could predict what the next year's growing season would be from whatever she saw in that animal. And that was where they were talking about her accuracy at. So
you don't hear too many people doing that these days, the old-fashioned folklore stuff.
Yeah, she had a superstition or a saying for just about everything. I heard so many legends and stories, and out of all the grandkids, and there was a bunch of them having 9 boys and 1 girl, and some of those brothers were married more than once, so there was a plethora of grandkids, but I was the only one born with a veil over my face, and then her superstitious mind that marked me as special. It was supposed to mean you had a second sight or that you were tuned into things, and I might as well blame it on that as anything. But because of that situation, she would always get me alone and teach me this, that, or the other, a charm or a way to bring good luck or to take bad luck off of you. And she lived in an old 2-story Victorian farmhouse. And then after all those kids were gone and my grandfather passed away when I was 6 months old, she took what had been the formal dining room and turned it into a quilting room. Her and her sister would sit and watch their soap operas during the warmer months, their stories, they called them. You didn't want to bother them when they were watching their stories. That was a quick way to get in trouble. The other quick way to get in trouble was to go into the sewing room, the quilting room. You were not allowed in there. She had a big quilting frame set up in there. She'd take those pieces and piece together a quilt. But that's where she'd always take me. It was dark in there, and like I said, been an old dining room, fireplace in there and everything. And she'd tell me some legend or story or something or another. And if I could repeat it back to her satisfaction, she'd reward me. Sometimes it'd be a Hershey bar or a little sack of penny candy, or sometimes even a crisp new $1 bill. And when I was a kid, you could get a lot with a $1 bill. I think comic books were 12 cents each. So I'd get a stack of comic books and an icy on the way home with that $1. But one time we had been on the way there, and there was another farmhouse that we had to drive by there, maybe 10 miles or so from where she lived. And years before, a kid had been chasing a ball. The farmhouse sat upon a little rise. Kid had chased a ball out of the front yard down that hill into the road and gotten hit by a car and lost his life. So that was always told as a cautionary tale to me, don't chase a ball out into the road or you could end up like that poor little boy. But I always felt something when I went by there. This particular evening, I think we'd been to the grocery store or something. We were taking her some groceries. And I was laying down in the back seat reading a comic book. This was in the days before they had seatbelt laws and stuff. It was an old Chevy 2 that my parents had. And back there reading my comic book, and I felt this weird little tingle up the back of my neck. And I knew right where we were going by. I raised up and looked out the window. Sure enough, there's that farmhouse up there, place where that little boy got hit by the car. I went back to my comic book. A few minutes later, we get to her house. My mom and dad are carrying the groceries in. She whisks me off to the quilting room I don't remember what the exact lesson or thing I was supposed to learn that time was, but it was about feeling things. And she said, "You feel things." And I said, "Yeah, I have feelings. You can hurt them, or if you pinch me, I'll feel it." She said, "No, I mean you feel things, like that spot on the highway on your way here tonight." I was like 8 years old, and my jaw hit the floor. It's like, she can read my mind. She looked like a witch. She did. She looked like witch out of Hansel and Gretel or something. She had arthritis in her hands, and she was kind of stooped over. And I was scared of her until I was in my probably 12 or something. Then she passed away when I was 13. But yeah, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I didn't mention that to anybody, but she knew that I'd felt something that night when we went by that spot. And there was another lady I met one time, much later in her life. She was in her 60s. She's passed away now. I'll call her Anna. But she was in high school at the time. And they were going to, her and a couple of friends were going to see my grandmother to get their fortunes told. Everybody in the community there knew that she did those things. And they had to walk a couple of miles to get to her house. And on the way there, this one lady, or girl, she was a girl at the time, Anna, she said, well, I'll go along with you all, but I don't believe in that. I think that old lady's just making stuff up. I don't think she has any special talent or anything. So they walk their 2 miles. They get there. They knock on the door. My grandmother came to the door. Everybody in the community called her Mamaw Bessie. The Mamaw Bessie, we're here to get our fortunes told. And she kind of studied them, and she said, I'll tell your fortune, and I'll tell your fortune, but I won't tell yours because you don't believe in me. And Anna said, you could have, again, like I was at 8, you could have knocked her over with a feather. She said, we were miles from her house when I made that statement. There was no way she could have known. The other girls didn't rat her out. And she said, I had a poker face. I wasn't smirking. I wasn't laughing or grinning or anything. But my grandmother called her out. So just all kinds of little things like that. I could fill a book of stories about her. And in fact, I'm working on one. So.
Where did she learn all of this? Was it from her mother or grandmother?
I'm assuming it was. Like I said, they lived in the Cades Cove area, the Smokies. And I don't know if it was probably her grandmother. A lot of that stuff, it kind of seems to skip a generation. Like my mother didn't have any intuitiveness or anything that I know of, not like I did. But she definitely learned it somewhere and knew what she was doing. They were into like the spiritualism movement from around the turn of the last century. That started kind of around the time they got into it was around World War I, which I want to say 1918, if my history serves me correct. But she had an uncle, my grandmother did, that went off to war and never came back. And they would try to contact him. And that's where they started using spirit boards. And my mother was born in 1927. And when she was a little girl, say in the 30s, early 30s, her family regularly had the spirit board sessions. They did seances. They had table tapping or table tipping. So it was just, it was their normal. They didn't know any better. That's just the way they were raised. And my mom and dad got married in 45. And my dad said he could remember, I think it was one of the first times that he went up there to meet the family, that they were gathered around doing one of those table tipping sessions. And he said they sounded like a bunch of heathens. Rise, table, rise, rise. And so shouting in a group. And my dad was a scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Now he'd come up from a hard scrabble place, hardcore Appalachia out in Middle Tennessee in Fentress County. But moved to Knoxville as a young man and went to the University of Tennessee, also my alma mater. And he said, I tried every way in the world to figure out if they were doing some kind of trickery. He said, I walked all around that table. I looked under it. Nobody had the toe of their boot under the table leg. Nobody had anything, a ruler up their sleeve or anything that they were making it rise for me. He said, that table was coming off the ground. And he talked about one time they took one of the grandkids and put it up on the table. And he said, that old wooden farm table that they had there, he said, it tried as hard as it could to raise with the added weight of that kid on there. He said it creaked and groaned, but it just couldn't raise with a kid on it, probably a 10-year-old kid or something. So again, that was my mom's normal. And then kind of my normal. I didn't know. They'd pretty much gotten out of all that by the time I came along. My mom's seventh brother, or the seventh son, had become a Baptist preacher and got him to get rid of all that stuff and got him to go into church and stuff. But they had some wild times there. And again, it was amazing. She read cards. She liked regular playing cards. She wouldn't touch a tarot deck. She said there was something evil about tarot, something dark.
Oh,
But she would take regular playing cards and then add her own symbols to them. And from what I remember, they look a lot like what they call the Lenormand cards now, which are the regular playing type deck, but they have some other pictures on there.
was it like ruin symbols or something else?
There were some symbols and then little objects and drawings and stuff. Maybe a ball, maybe a bottle, maybe an owl.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
Interesting.
Probably stuff that they recognize from the Apparitions and
Yeah,
that they use for whether
again,
it's in
there
a
was
spell
an
or
omen or
Yeah.
a warning or portent for everything. If a hen crowed and they could figure out which one it was, she was on the dinner table the next day. A hen crowing is bad luck. Only roosters are supposed to crow. If the cows moved after dark, that meant something bad was coming. There were certain things you weren't allowed to do. You weren't allowed to whistle after dark or whistle in the house. Trying to think some more.
Uh-oh.
Good Lord, don't put a hat on the bed. I remember one time I had a little cowboy hat and I put it on my grandma's bed and she wailed like a banshee. I thought something had happened to her. And I went in there. She's like, "You get that hat off that bed." And I snatched it off and she said, "That's bad luck." She said, "You might as well just take a pistol and shoot somebody."
Oh,
wow.
my.
They were hardcore superstitious, but to this day, I won't put a hat on a bed. I don't like to go back in a different door than the one I went out of. That stuff, it just kind of sticks in your head, that a black cat crossing your path or walking under a ladder or any of that stuff. And I don't know. Like I said, I don't know where they got
about
it.
strangers showing up too, right?
Yeah. If a stranger showed up and wanted to borrow something, they could be trying to witch you. And so you had to be careful what you gave out. She told one story that had happened to a family she knew up in the Smokies. Their cow went dry. And I guess it's her grandfather or somebody went out in the woods. And there was a woman that had built a cow effigy out of sticks and was milking it. And there was milk coming out of the effigy. And he took a shot at her, didn't try to shoot her, but just shot at her. She jumped up and ran off, and he smashed the fake cow. And after that, their cows started giving milk again. Now, how about that? That's, of course, that could just be an old legend or a story, but she told that for the truth. And I've heard other stories about that, where if somebody was witching you, there was things that you could do to find out who it was, that they would show up wanting to borrow something, usually like a drink of water. They want a drink of water or borrow some milk or something like that. And that's how you knew who was witching you. And you didn't give them anything, or they had even more power over you. Now, it's funny that she called herself a witch, a gypsy witch, but then she was afraid of other witches. Now, that old farmhouse, it had the old like skeleton key, like under the doorknob, there was a keyhole shaped thing that you had to take a big old key to lock and unlock the doors. At night, she would poke cloves of garlic in there. If she didn't have any garlic, she'd put a cotton ball set between a bobby pin, and that was to keep witches from coming through the keyhole.
Oh my!
Wow. And there's some of this stuff I've heard of since. I've talked to other people, particularly in the Southern Appalachians, that heard those things. If you had a porch, you painted it haint blue. That's an actual color. You can look that up. And the reason for that was if something came up on the porch and found out that it couldn't get through the keyhole, it would see that, it would confuse it, it would think it was the sky, and it would go up through the porch roof and on to wherever it was supposed to go. Now, that's more of a South Carolina thing from what I found out in my research. But my grandmother, her porches, the front and back, always had to be painted haint blue. That's what they called it. And she would tell you about that, especially in the mountains. She said, it's pretty up there in the Smokies. There's some gorgeous places to hike and stuff. But she said, whatever you do, don't get caught out after dark, because there's a haint in every holler. I can still remember her telling me that.
Wow.
Oh, my.
And that'll probably be the name of the book that I'm writing about, her haint in every holler.
Wow.
Wow, that's a good title.
Yeah.
It reminds me about when they're so suspicious of strangers and stuff. I mean, it's also like the black-eyed children that you have to give them permission to come
Yeah,
in. I mean,
it's
that's
kind of the
once you give
same
people permission, then you're
principle.
in trouble.
And
Hmm.
she didn't like welcome mats either. And I've had other people. I was on with I think it was Amber's Paranormal or something one night. She was talking about that. She said, if you've got a welcome mat, throw it away. That anything that sees that, that's inviting it in. And somebody said, what if I turn it upside down? And she said, oh, no, because then anything underneath sees it, they can come up. If you're going to have a mat, you want one that says, go away. Leave us alone.
That makes sense.
Oh, my.
But those old hills down there, particularly in East Tennessee, Western North Carolina, they're full of stories and legends like that. Crybaby bridges and that sort of thing, vanishing hitchhikers. I'd heard all those tales growing up, and then found out later on, like I heard that, and then it turned out it was just an urban legend, maybe something that happened somewhere, but there was a retelling of it that got passed, almost like the telephone game that you used to play in school. That the time this person told it to that person, and they told it to somebody else, it had changed, usually the location. But my dad said that he'd heard a lot of those old tales that they used to tell where he grew up 3 or 4 hours away from where my mom did. But he said same story, but just set locally. So it's the South in particular has that great oral tradition. That was what you did in the summertime after the supper and it was starting to get dark. You went and sat on the screened-in porch and started telling stories. Or in the wintertime, you either sat in front of the fireplace at that grandmother or over at my dad's mother's. They sat around the wood stove. They had no potbelly stove in there. And they'd sit around the stove and talk about all of these weird things. So it was, back then, there was no television, certainly no internet or anything like that. Maybe got a newspaper once a week. If you can get a radio signal, you'd listen to the Grand Ole Opry or something like that. And that was only one night a week. The rest of the time, you might have a Victrola, but most of the time it was just people telling stories, swapping tales. Now, all of them weren't scary. Some of them were funny. Some of them were poignant. But the scary stuff, they used to trot those out after dark. And I loved it. I grew up listening to those and developed an appreciation. Like I said, from the time that I saw that full-body apparition, it made me question what's out there, what's going on. And I found my journey that's been, almost 60 years now. I'll be 60 on Halloween. So 55 years anyway. And I found out that there are no answers. I've got more questions than I started with. And I've pretty much given up looking for the answers. Now I'm on to the next set of questions. I was on Where'd the Road Go with Soraya Ascath. And one night he likened the paranormal to trying to put together a big jigsaw puzzle, thousands of pieces, but you don't have the box to tell even what the picture's supposed to look like. And then you find these pieces that don't fit anywhere, and you realize that some joker has mixed together 7 or 8 puzzles, and that some of the pieces don't fit in the one you're in. That's one of the best analogies I've ever heard.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Cisco, that fits right in. I mean, that's why we like talking to people so much, yourself and the other guests we've had, because there's always something that you guys say that like
you haven't heard, you haven't
true
thought
to
about.
us.
Cisco, who's here in the chat one night, she and I were talking on a show, and she likened the paranormal to an onion. You peel back that layer, there's more onion. You get to the middle of it, it's still onion down there. And that's a good analogy too. But I love collecting those stories. That's how my first book, Strange Things in the Woods, came about, was me recounting all these stories I'd heard. And I had the epiphany to write that at my grandmother's funeral, at her the service there. I just thought, all those tales, all those legends, all that stuff I heard, it dies right there with her. I was the only one of the grandkids that cared anything about that. Even her own kids didn't really care. They were into hunting and fishing and football. And I liked the spooky stuff and being out in the woods. So I took that mantle upon myself. That's how that book came about. It was initially a 2-book series, and I'd be on shows like yours, and people say, well, those are other people's stories that you've collected. Do you have any stories? Like, yeah, I do. And I'd tell 1 or 2. And then I got to thinking about that. I probably got enough to write a book, and I did. That's where My Strange World came into play. And I've actually got enough now for a volume 2 to that, the stuff that's happened since I wrote that one.
Oh, cool.
So it's an
Wow.
ongoing thing. And I love being the scribe. I love being the keeper of the tales that way, because a lot of these, like I said, I've talked to some of my uncles and they don't remember any of that. They don't, like they remember little bits and pieces of it, but and a lot of the people in that book are memorialized in that book. Probably about 90% of the people that I collected those stories from in Strange Things in the Woods have passed on. So they live on, their memory lives on, and their stories live on through me. And I love being able to do that. And one of my favorite things to do is to go to an old folks home and have either a storytelling night or a session reading from my books. And some people, like, there's no bingo tonight. Crap, and they'll sit there and do their knitting or their needlepoint or whatever. But then afterwards, I'd have people come up to me and say, when I was little, I remember there was something like that where I grew up. And that to me means more than anything, because, some of those poor old folks don't have a lot of time left. And if they're going to tell their stories and have somebody collect them, now's the time to do it. So I enjoy that. And the other group of people that I like to talk to are the teenagers. I go into a new town or a new area, community. I'll seek out the old people because they know all those old stories. And then I'll find out where the teenagers hang out, the skateboard park or the mall or the shopping area or something. They know every haunted lane, places, where scary places where they like to take their dates and stuff. The school kid pipeline, that's another good way to collect those stories, because I remember when I was a kid in school, we'd be out on the playground and there'd be kids out there under a tree telling ghost stories and things that were supposedly true. So it's again that oral tradition of the South, and I'm happy to carry that on and do it in written form, and then I do a lot of narrations too.
Well, after your grandma passed away, what happened to those special cards that she made? Did they just get thrown away, or did a family member get it?
I've got them. I
You
had
do?
them. I think my sister-in-law has them now, but I got the deck the ones
Oh,
that she had
cool.
decorated herself. And they ended up, when my brother passed away, I'd left some stuff there with him because had moved out of town. And my sister-in-law has it now. I'd like to get those back from her before she passes away. She's in her late 70s, early 80s. So anybody else came across them, they wouldn't have any idea what they were and probably just throw them away. But last time I talked to her, which has been several months ago, she still had them and knew where they were. So
wow, that'd be interesting to look at.
And
there's card companies that'll make special decks for you. You should have them reproduced.
Yeah. That's a thought. Like I said, it's very similar to a Lenormand deck. If you look at those, I don't really know any other way to describe it. It's a regular playing card deck, but with added symbols up in the corner. But the Strange Things in the Woods, all those aren't scary. Some of them are poignant, some of them are funny, but a lot of them are hair-raising too. That was the theme of the book. Just I seem to have just a myriad, a plethora, if you will, of stories from the woods. So that was how the theme of that first book came about. But there's so I could write other books: Strange Things in the Sky, Strange Things in the Water, Strange Things in the City. Eventually I'll expound on that. It's not just stuff in the woods, but there's something just creepier to me about stuff that you encounter in the woods when you're away from people. I've hiked all over the Smokies. I used to go off trail, to go orienteering. I had a compass and a topo map. I didn't care for the touristy hiking trails. I wanted to make my own way, and I've been in some scary places up there, and the Smokies are a strange place anyway. The Cades Cove area where my granny was from, where she was born, and the North Shore of Fontana Lake are probably the most haunted areas in the Smokies. Got a book about that too, National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, Volume 1, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I talk about some of those people up there that went missing that they never found a trace of, but also get into the legends, the ghost stories, the Cherokee legends, some modern hauntings and stuff. It's just, as Patton said about war, God help me, but I do love it. So I love researching and writing about that kind of stuff.
Was there any certain spirits or cryptids or anything like that that only come out around Halloween that you know of?
Not that I know of, but again, that's a time when the veil's thin and you
Right.
are more likely to encounter things like that. Now, there are some creatures in folklore, like now that may be a Christmas that I'm thinking of in Wales, but I'm not familiar about anything that just comes out on Halloween.
Okay.
Again, the veil's thin this time of year, but I've talked to people that study the esoteric metaphysical side of it, and they say that the veil is thinning all the time now. And yes, it is thinner around Halloween, but it's getting thinner the rest of the time.
Right.
That's a frightening prospect, and they
Yeah.
claim that's why there's an uptick in people that are seeing cryptids and having these paranormal experiences and other things. That it's
Right.
between the worlds is thinning, and if you're able to pick up on that, then you'll be tuned into that and then see.
Yeah, we believe that also. I mean, we've heard of people like Dolores Cannon saying that the world, the earth is going to change its frequency or its dimension, it's going to raise to a higher vibration. And also we hear about, once we raise our vibration or our frequencies, that we start seeing into the veil or able to see a different aspect of the world that most people can't see.
Yeah. Now, Cisco's been a guest on my radio show, Everything Out There. It's on the Clyde Lewis's Ground Zero radio network. She was on 2 episodes back to back, and we talked about that it's about raising your frequency, your vibration, to get more attuned into that. And she called it, or she likened it to putting rocks in your pocket when you have to deal with lower vibrational things and people. I mean, there are people that are psychic vampires and don't even know it. They can suck the energy right out of you. And she said, every time you encounter something like that, it's like putting more rocks in your pocket. Eventually, you're weighed down with all this negative energy and low vibration stuff. And she said, you got to stop every now and then, go out, kick your shoes off, put your feet in the grass, reconnect with the earth and that earth energy, the earth's frequency, the Schumann resonance, I think they call it. It's the vibration. You probably know about that since you make music, but all things vibrate at a certain frequency, living things.
Right.
And she's like, you want to shed that negative energy. It's like taking all those rocks out of your pocket. And she said, there's people been walking around for decades with pockets full of rocks, every pocket. He said, you'd get all those out of there, you'd be amazed how light and airy you feel. And that makes sense. I thought that was a good analogy. I'd never thought of it that way. But that's the thing about Cisco and I. We one of us will say something to the other that's just so profound, like, I never thought about that. And between the both of us, we've been studying this kind of stuff for over 100 years, if you can imagine.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, we like grounding, whether you go out in our backyard or even out on a nature hike, and get in tune with your environment and just feel that peace come upon you, and raise your vibration. And even at home, when we don't get a chance to go out, like Jane's music, we listen to that vibrational music that just raises you up.
Yeah, and you can correct me, but I believe it's at 441 hertz that's supposed to
432 is what we like.
432. Yeah, I got it wrong.
432 and 528. 528 actually heals your whole body and DNA and just helps with all around healing.
Oral beats, I think it is.
Yeah.
You can, retune your brain, if you will. And I've listened to some of that and felt the effects of it. I think it's real. It makes sense.
Yep, we believe that also.
Right.
And you've got those Tibetan singing bowls. I think that's the same principle. They make that tone at a certain frequency. They use that for meditation, for cleansing, for a lot of different things. That's some amazing stuff. Even crystals. I see you've got a lot of crystals there behind you. They have a certain frequency. And people that don't believe it, well, look at your watch. It most likely has a quartz movement in it. There you go. You can make a quartz radio. I did that in Scouts with a razor blade and a piece of wire and a quartz crystal. And you hook a little earphone up to it. You can pick up stuff off the air with that little quartz crystal. There's energy there. There's more than we understand there, I think. Getting over into Tesla territory here, but he knew what he was talking about too.
Oh, yeah. Now, getting back to the welcome mats. Now, is it just welcome mats, or can you have a little figurine or something hanging on the wall on your front porch saying welcome? So is it anything welcome or just a rug?
According to what I heard, it's anything. If you don't
Oh,
vet
okay.
who's there trying, and I heard somebody else say the elf on the shelf, don't do that. You're just inviting the fae into your home to cause mischief and trouble. And the people think, it's a Christmas thing, but it's not at all.
Right.
And, that's when we talked about that last time I was here, the fae and the hierarchy that they have, and a lot of people will laugh at that. Yet they believe in Bigfoot and cryptids and UFOs and things. But if you study the fae and really dig down into it, like in Ireland and places like that, where it was almost and probably still is a religion, there's a hierarchy there. I read accounts from the 17 and 1800s about hairy men that came out of the woods that were part of the fae. Well, there's your Bigfoot encounters. Read another story about some gentlemen that encountered a horseless carriage that came down out of the sky with little people in it. There's your UFO encounter. So it's all connected. We're just looking at it from with a decidedly modern lens. But whatever's out there, it's been around for a long, long, long time.
You know any stories of fae connected to mushrooms?
I've heard about the fairy circles and stuff where you have the mushroom circles and that you're not supposed to mess with those or get in those, or heaven help you if you lay down and take a nap in a fairy circle. You're just asking to be taken by the fae.
They say there's portals inside them.
Yeah. Now I've heard stories in the Smokies of the little people up there. The Cherokee have legends of the little people. And again, it's a fae story, but it's just through a Cherokee lens. And they actually went to war with them, and then they are supposedly at peace with them now. They coexist. But I've heard stories of people following, they call them up there fairy lights or fairy lanterns.
Yeah.
I talked to a guy years and years ago that'd been hunting up there back before it was a national park. And he said he thought he saw somebody with a lantern. He was wearing one of those old carbide lamps that they used to wear on their heads. And it had run out of gas. You put the chunk of carbide in the water, it gives off a flammable gas, and then you had a light there. Well, he was following what he thought was another hunter that either had a lantern or some kind of light. He's following it, sees it go through this little area. He follows along right behind it. He steps off about a 8 or 10 foot little drop off, sprained his ankle, jammed his gun, both barrels down in the ground. And whatever it was, it floated right across there. And there's stories like that in the Smokies of the fae don't like what you're doing. They will lead you astray. They will lure you into the woods and get you lost. And then there's other stories of people seeing the same things where it led them out of the woods and back to safety, back to a road or a river or something where they could find their way out. So it goes both ways, but they're not to be toyed with. And if you do go out in the woods and you want to be left alone, wear an iron bracelet. I had one. I left it in New Mexico. I got it on Etsy. But it's made out of iron, and supposedly that's like poison to the fae and the fairies.
Wow.
Saw a picture of a child's crib that was made out of iron spikes, like railroad spike material, to keep them from stealing the baby.
Well, I heard many people say that spirits don't like bells.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff about that.
Yeah, they don't like iron. They don't like bells. And the whole thing with the horseshoe hanging above the door, upside down, that's to catch your good luck, but it's made out of iron. It's to keep the fae out of your house, or whatever, goblins, whatever you call them, whatever's out there. People will spike their yard. I knew some people down in rural Alabama that got railroad spikes and put them in the corners of their property to keep anything evil away.
Our neighbor, 2 houses down, she's got tons of blue bottles upside down in her front yard in her flower bed. So that's supposed to keep spirits away also, right? Or
trap
catch them
witches or something.
Same
Isn't
those
it?
bottle trees too. Yeah, you're supposed to be able to catch witch or ghosts or something. They fly into that bottle and then caught upside down. And then every so often you're supposed to change those out. You have to cork them and take them and bury them somewhere. And that's not to be confused with a witch jar, which is some sort of spell working that somebody's doing. I was watching a guy on YouTube. It wasn't live, but he was out in the woods with a metal detector and near an old foundation of an old house, and he dug up like an old glass mayonnaise jar or something, and it had like a nail and hair and some other stuff in it. And when it was premiering, the people in the chat are like, "No, don't open it. Put it back. Put it back."
Right.
And he actually opened it and poured it out. And he's like, "I don't know what this is, but it smells hideous. There's hair in there. There's fingernails. There's all this stuff." And it was a witch jar. They call it. They were putting a spell on somebody. And I don't know.
Did anything happen to him after he opened it up?
I don't know of. He did an update though and said that he had figured out what it was after people warned him, and that he gathered it back up the best he could, resealed it, and took it out and buried it where he found it. And that if he ever found anything like that again, he'd leave it alone.
Wow. Sometimes
the only way to learn is the hard way. So
yeah.
Now you talked about the Fae and taking children. Is that anything to do with Rumpelstiltskin? Was he part of the Fae, that fable?
I think that legend is probably based off of it. And same with Rip Van Winkle. You know, he was in the mountains in, I think, New York or wherever it was, came across little men playing tin pins in the woods, and they invited him to join them. They gave him a drink of mead or ale or something. He drank that, fell asleep, and woke up 30 years later, 25 years, whatever it was.
Wow.
So I think a lot of those fairy tales, the Brothers Grimm were onto something. And if you go back and read those tales, particularly in the original German, they lose a lot in the translation. But if you read them in the German, they're very, very dark. And it's not tales that you could tell kids these days. There's a lot of it. It's been Disneyfied to the point where it's a cute story now. But back then, they were cautionary tales. They were warnings. They were supposed to scare the pants off the little kids.
They were luring these children and the loving fairies and all these little things that they're making cute, which were going to get them in trouble.
Yeah, well, they take babies, and sometimes they would replace them with a changeling, which was a half fairy, half human hybrid that they would put in place of the baby for the people to raise. And in the lore that I've studied, the reason they did that, it was because their bloodlines are weak, and we have whatever in our blood that they don't. And that's why, to perpetuate their race and to keep it growing, they need human blood every so often, or human offspring, to work into the mix to keep their cells going.
Now, you have an Among the Missing story about where the boy was found in the shed or whatever that you didn't think was quite the same after he came back.
Yeah, Riker Webb. If you look at the thumbnail for that video, that little kid has seen some stuff. When I was a small child, I remember seeing Vietnam veterans that came back, and they'd have that look, that 1,000-yard stereo. They had seen something. And that little boy, he doesn't even look the same as the picture before he went in the woods. And in fact, somebody commented on that video, said, "That's not the same kid. Whatever it is, take it back and put it in the woods and find the actual kid." But yeah, he had wandered away from home in his little footy pajamas and supposedly walked, I think it's 2 miles or more, in the rain and bad weather and all this, over not necessarily a mountain, but a pretty good sized hill, back down the other side. And then they found him in the storage shed of somebody's cabin. He was sitting in I think it was like a lawnmower bag or something, like the bag on the back that catches grass. He was sitting in there. They heard him talking to himself. I would love to know what he was saying.
Yeah.
When they brought him out of there, his feet wasn't even that dirty. Now, imagine hiking through the woods in your sock feet, even when it wasn't raining or bad weather. Your feet's not gonna look like that. You can see it in the thumbnail. They've got him on the stretcher, and I would be very fascinated to hear when he's an adult, if he can recall any of that and what he has to say about it. Now I've covered cases like that where people went missing and were found under strange circumstances, and they either don't remember or they don't want to talk about it. So
Mm.
that gives you something to pause or to reflect on there.
Well, you think they might have gone into like a time slip and they actually don't remember?
So that's a possibility. I mean, there's so many theories out there now. I hate to burst anybody's bubble, but a lot of these missing people cases, it's pure accident or misfortune. You've
Mm.
either overestimated your abilities, you've underprepared for the weather or other conditions, and it's not that spooky or mysterious all the
Mhm.
time like somebody would have you to believe. Some people, but there are some cases that don't fit that mold where there is something strange about it, where there's more story that's being told or something. That doesn't necessarily have to be anything
Right.
spooky. But that's one of the theories of time slips, portals, Bigfoot,
Mhm.
UFOs, the glimmer man or the translucent being, everything. But animal predators, human predators, there's serial killers that have taken people off some of these trails. So
Mhm.
again, it's just, I don't think the majority of those cases are really that spooky. That's, I think, something that somebody cooked up to sell books and to drive some kind of spooky narrative when it's not really that spooky at all. You know, oh, the dogs lost their scent. Well, yeah, it came a downpour. A tracker dog can't track anybody in the rain. So
Mhm.
there's usually a reasonable and somewhat rational explanation. But again, we covered some recently, some unsolved wilderness disappearances where there's no trace. How can that be? How can you go missing and not leave anything? Sometimes not even a footprint.
Yeah.
So something unusual out there.
I mean,
Well,
even
did
like Crater Lake, there's a lot of mysterious disappearances of, all the national parks, but Crater Lake I really like because there's stories where they say that people just walk into the lake and drown, like something's
Yeah,
calling them, whether it's
like
sprites or
Wow.
yeah, they
spirits
have
or
no control, and that whole area is strange. I've read accounts of rangers talk about the island that's out there in the middle of the lake. They've seen like what looked like a fire out there with people dancing around it. They get a
Oh.
boat, go out there. There's no people. There's no fire. What on earth is that? Now that's near the Oregon vortex. There's a famous energy vortex in that area of Oregon, and I think it's in that area where Crater Lake is. And
Hmm.
there are some unexplained disappearances there. But again, was it really that strange? Was it an abduction? Was somebody,
right.
there's like when they started, when the water level started lowering at Lake Mead in Nevada, they found all kinds of bodies in there. But a lot of those, that was criminal activity
Right.
that put
Yep.
those people there. There was
Mhm.
one guy they found in a 55-gallon drum. That's just right outside of Las Vegas. And as Joe Pesci said, and I think it was Goodfellas, like, there's a lot of holes in the desert, and there's a lot of problems in those holes. There's a lot of problems in Lake Mead too, from
Yeah.
dating way back when the mob ran Vegas. I lived in Vegas for about 10 years, and a lot of stories out there of missing people, and it's usually they made friends with the wrong people, or trusted the wrong people, or double crossed the wrong people. Nothing
Well,
mysterious
recently,
about it at all.
recently, Gerald heard that they're considering helping, or not really helping, but cleaning out the homeless communities in these big cities and replacing them and putting them in national parks. Did you hear anything like that?
I haven't heard that, but supposedly there's an epidemic going on of that, and they're running out of places to put people. I
Wow.
know here in New England, they're putting a lot of them up in the resorts on Cape Cod during the off season. So
Hmm.
I don't. There's a crisis going on, and I don't have the answer for it. Now I haven't heard
I mean,
that, but as far as I know, there are already people that live there. I mean, we made a video about feral people
Yeah.
that in the national parks, and that's a real thing. I've had people say, "Oh, there couldn't be people that lived in the park. You'd run across them, you would see them. You just haven't
Hmm.
been far enough back in the woods." There were people like that over where my dad was from. They didn't come out of the woods. They were self sufficient. They farmed. They had a creek to drink water out of. They knew how to hunt and fish. They moonshined. They made their own liquor. They had no reason to come out of those woods.
Right.
And the Smokies is a big place. I can't remember the exact acreage, but it's huge. And there's places there you can get to that. I I mean, I've been places without even really trying that I'm probably one of the first white people to set foot there in several hundred years anyway.
Oh my.
And,
Wow.
the natives, so there's, again, if you think there's not a place that people could hide in the wilderness, you just haven't been deep enough in the wilderness. And then I like to point toward it. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was he's an Olympic Park bomber, one of those guys. He hid out in Nantahala National Forest for over 5 years when he was on the FBI's most wanted list. And he didn't even have a lot of outdoor experience or survival experience. Now, if somebody like that can go into the woods and elude the FBI for 5 years, what about somebody that's all they've ever known, that they were born and raised in those woods? They're going to know every hidey hole, every way to camouflage. If they don't want to be seen, you won't see them. Dwight McCarter, he's retired now. He was a ranger, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, lead tracker, famous for working on the Dennis Martin case. He said there are people that live in the park that he just called them people that like their privacy, like to be off grid, but that's not necessarily feral, as in like wild people necessarily, but there are people that live in the park. So it wouldn't surprise me if they started putting people in there. Maybe they'll have them homestead or something. I don't know. That's the way a lot of these parks prior.
Can you imagine more 911 cases?
Yeah.
Or 411 cases.
Yeah, missing among the missing.
More missing.
I don't know. There are no easy answers for things like that are going on.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you got this take Tennessee and Kentucky, you go back far enough into the woods or into the communities, you're starting to feel like you're not welcome. You're starting to like almost going in another world. Then by the time you get in the Appalachians, I mean, oh my gosh, they don't like strangers there either.
There's places there where people have disappeared for being where they shouldn't.
Right.
If you've ever heard that Steve Earle song, Copperhead Road, that's a real road in Johnson County, Tennessee. They had to change the name of the road because people kept changing or stealing the sign. But that's based on a true story. I mean, it used to be the revenuers and then the people with these grow operations or cooking operations now. There's places, if you don't belong there, and they know everybody that lives in those little communities, and especially up in some of those little hollers. And if you've not got any business there, don't get caught there. As my granny said, don't get caught out after dark. Now, she was talking about haints, but there's worse stuff out there that you can run into. Same with Northern California. I've been up through there, the Sequoia Forest and Humboldt County. It's Bigfoot territory. The woods are thick and old growth up there. Some of those trees are so huge. There's one chandelier tree, you can drive a car through it where they've hollowed it out. But there's also a lot of people up there that are up there for a reason, because they don't want anybody to know what they're doing and they don't want to be seen or found out. And you stumble across something like that, then you go missing.
I was getting ready to bring up
nothing mysterious about that.
I was just getting ready to mention Murder Mountain.
Yep.
Yep, there's a lot of places you shouldn't go.
Wow. You got to be careful these days.
And, if you're lucky, they'll just chase you out of there or fire a shotgun a couple of times. Might shoot you with rock salt too if you're lucky. But yeah, there's just places where you're not welcome, and doing the research before you go into those places. You can make friends with somebody that lives there and be their guest. But if you just show up and go into some of these little mountain communities, you stand a good chance of never being seen again. And again, it's nothing mysterious. It's not Bigfoot. It's not UFOs. It's just you happened into some place that you didn't need to be for whatever reason.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the show, Steve. Why don't you tell one more story? Tell us something special that you think everybody would enjoy. Is there one special story that you like the most out of all of them?
They're all special stories.
No,
It'd be
I
like
know
trying to pick a favorite child if I had a bunch of kids. I've got another one that's probably the most scared I ever was when I had the black-eyed kids encounter. You can hear that one over on. I think I've got it up on Among the Missing now from where I told it on the Belief Hole. But the second most scared I was the one I told you about, the thing chasing me out of the ditch. Well, the third scariest one, I went to school with this kid named Dickie, and I went home with him one time, and they liked their privacy. They had bought an old farm, and their driveway was about 2 miles long from the main road, and it was
Wow.
like dirt and gravel. You didn't go in and out of there except on foot or horseback or four-wheel drive in inclement weather in the wintertime. And I'd went to visit him, lived on just a top of a ridge back there, creek down below him, and the highway back this way. Been an old several hundred acre farm at one time, a working farm. Well, he and I were both kind of scientific minded. This was third grade, and both our dads worked out the National Laboratory. So we had gone about halfway down his driveway, so about a mile from the house. There was an old shale pit down there. So we were down there poking around in that, trying to find fossils. We wanted to find a dinosaur bone or a trilobite or something like that. And in this shale pit is dug into a hillside. Well, up on the top of that, there had been a little outbuilding or shack or something there at one time. It's kind of fallen in on itself. It hadn't quite completely fallen in. And we were down there, and then we heard something. And both of us looked up about the same time to the top of that bank. And there was something peering out of that window at us. And I've drawn it by hand before, the best that I could come up with, and he did as well. We drew it independently of each other and came up with the same thing. It looked like a horse's skull, but it still had the eyeballs. And instead of on the side of the head like a horse does, these were in the front, and they were as big as oranges. And it didn't have horse teeth. Horse, like a cow, they have those big old flat teeth for chewing vegetation. This had canines, incisors, stuff meant for ripping and tearing. And it made like a hissing noise or something. We both looked up at the same time, and it looked like it was grinning at us. Of course, it didn't. It was a skull of whatever it was, so it couldn't help but grin. And we freaked out, ran up his driveway the rest of the way, a mile or so, screaming and hollering, kind of like I did when the thing got after me in the woods. His mom came out, was trying to get us calmed down. And his dad was working evenings or night shift at that time, and he was in the house asleep. And we woke him up, and he came outside and, what in the world is going on out here? And we breathlessly told about this thing that we saw peering out the window of that old, almost tumble down shed that looked like a horse's skull, but with eyes and sharp teeth, and it hissed at us.
Wow.
And he got mad, and he said, I'm going to go down there and have a look. He went in the house and got his shotgun, went down the driveway, and we're sitting up there under an apple tree outside. His mom had given us Kool-Aid to try to calm us down, give us sugar to calm us down. This was back in the 70s. And we kept listening. We thought we're going to hear gunfire. We're going to hear screams. We're going to hear something. But we didn't hear anything. And then probably 20 or 30 minutes, seemed like a lifetime. But he came slowly walking back up the driveway, had the gun over his shoulder. But he had the most peculiar scowl on his face. And he came over the apple tree where we were, and he kind of hunkered down. And he said, I want you boys to promise me that whatever you do, you won't ever, ever go down there and play around where that old shack is, not in the shale pit, not up. We hadn't even been up near the shack. It was covered in kudzu and stuff anyway. And didn't have any problem promising that. We swore. And as far as I know, my friend never went back. I certainly did. That was the last time I visited there. But then we drew at school. We got together, and I drew what I saw, and he drew what he saw, and it matched. And the Beast of Swanson Lane, I've got that up on 13 past midnight. I think it's still up over there. And come to find out, this guy, his father, was a full Cherokee. And he saw something down there, or knew what it was, that he forbid us forever going down there. And about 2 weeks later, my friend came up to me at school, and he said, my dad took the tractor and pulled that old shack down into the shale pit and burned it.
Ooh.
So we're thinking it was some kind of shapeshifter. I mean, in adulthood now, thinking back on it, I think it was some kind of shapeshifter, a Wendigo, a skinwalker, something. He knew what it was from the way we were describing it. In fact, it might have been something that was after him, since he was the Cherokee, the only full Cherokee in that family. But that's the third scariest that I've ever been.
Wow.
And again, to this day, I can still see it if I close my eyes. That hiss, those teeth, I looked like they were dripping. It looked hungry. Like I said, it couldn't help but have that rictus grin because it didn't have any skin on it anywhere, but still had the eyeballs.
It had the horns and antlers.
Yeah, there was some sort of antlers or something on the top of it, almost like a deer antler. It was as a weirder conglomeration as a platypus, that has all this different parts of different animals. It was like that, like a horse's skull with wolf's teeth, these giant eyeballs, and then some kind of something. But it seemed like it had an X or a cross or something on its forehead.
Now they talk about how some of the Native Americans can either summon the Wendigo or turn into the Wendigo.
Yeah. But like I said, just in retrospect, he passed away. He lived to be 100 years old. So whatever it was, it took it a long time to get him if it was after him.
Wow.
But, he was dead serious, though, that he didn't want us to. I mean, we had to swear to him that we would never, ever, ever go down there and play again. And we didn't. I didn't. I don't think Dickie did either. But whatever it was, I don't want to see it again.
I don't blame you. That'd be horrible. Well, that was a good story to end on, Steve.
Yeah.
That was exciting.
So what time is your Sow Tuesday to celebrate your birthday?
I haven't decided yet. I'll probably go live around, I think around 5 or 6 Eastern time and go for a couple hours. I'm going to send out some links. If you'd like to pop in and say howdy and happy birthday, come on in. You don't have to stay. You can just pop in and out. I'm sending some links out to some people. And
this will be on which channel?
Among the Missing. I'm just going to do it over there. That's the big channel right now. Just passed 98,000 subscribers the other night. So
wow.
Having a lot of fun, had a lot of good times over there, despite the subject matter. But that's the thing. It's about the missing, and occasionally I'll talk about cryptids or something strange, or read listener stories and things like that. But again, if we can bring one person home or give one family the closure that they so desperately seek, then my wife and I, we're doing what we feel has been laid on our heart to do. So it'll always be about the missing people, but every now and then you just got to take a step back, because it's the same with the true crime and any of that stuff. When as Nietzsche once wrote, when you peer into the abyss also peers into you. And the missing people, especially the kids or the senior citizens, the silver alerts, the people with Alzheimer's or dementia that go missing, that just tears my heart out. I dream about those faces. I see them in my sleep. But every now and then I'll do something a little lighter. So that's what the Halloween celebration is going to be. But the rest of the time, it's about the missing.
Now we like your radio shows too that you have going on all the time.
Yeah. Now the everything out there, that's there's an episode tonight. Downtown Terry Brown, if you know him, he's got a YouTube channel, Tales of the Sonic Voyage. He plays music and rare albums and things like that. But he's also a very talented writer, and I've narrated a couple of his stories. There's one called Jimmy, about a ghost that he encountered in an office building in Cincinnati when he was late teens, early 20s, out of high school. There's got another one, a true story that happened to him. The ghost, the smoking ghost in the Delta 88. That's a true story. Oh. He's got some more that I haven't narrated yet. And he and I are actually doing a book together. He's my guest tonight. And we talk about where he grew up in suburban Ohio and some of the things he encountered there. He's a great, great storyteller. So check that out. It's on Ground Zero Radio at 9 o'clock Eastern, 9 to 11, 6 to 9. No, 6 to 10. I time zones confuse me. I've lived on the West Coast for years. I moved one time zone east. I couldn't tell you what it were. Now I'm all the way on the East Coast. But it's 9 to 11 Eastern time. If you can work it out there based on your time zone.
There you go.
Take a listen. I think you'd enjoy it.
Well, it's been fun having you tonight, Steve. Thank you so much for coming and
It's
telling
been
us
a
some
pleasure.
stories.
Thanks for having
Yes,
me.
thank you.
I'll get you guys on the radio show sometime soon. And
Okay.
I hope you have a safe and happy Halloween. And be
All right.
careful.
Thank you
out
very
there. I
much.
don't want to make a video about you. Don't go missing.
Yep. Just send us a link or whatever and get a hold of us, and we'll come on anything you have.
Sounds
Right.
great. Thanks again. You folks have a good evening.
All right. Thanks,
Bye.
Steve.
Bye,
everybody.
Steve. Well, thank you everyone for showing up. That was amazing. This is going to have to be a rewatch and just re-listen to his stories. There's probably all kinds of things that we missed. What an amazing guest. Thank you so much for showing up and joining us with this wonderful storyteller and amazing book writer. He's an author. Go check out his books, check out his channels, and hopefully everyone will show up on his birthday and pop in and say happy birthday to Steve.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many stories he has, and you go to his 13 Past Midnight, his Insomnia Theater, you go to his Among the Missing. There's so many stories you just can't cover enough in an hour or 2 hours.
All right. So
And then our next show will be Tuesday night on Halloween.
Yep.
So if all of you haven't seen any of it posted on our Facebook page or stuff, this will be a quick preview for you for Halloween night.
And that's 6 o'clock Central again, correct? Yes.
Yep. So let me take us down for a minute. They won't be able to hear us, but they'll see the background. So Tuesday is 6 o'clock. Be sure to tune in for
Neoma Finn.
For Neoma Finn. I'll just leave that up. And she's going to be telling a lot of stories about the Midwest, or maybe all over, but basically the Midwest and Illinois, about ghost stories and haunted bridges and all kinds of stuff. She's such a good storyteller, just like Steve was tonight. And Neoma is a awesome author and tells stories, and Dawn has her own radio channel that she puts her audio out on, and it's just amazing. So look forward to that, 6 p.m. Central on Midwest Night Watchers, Halloween night.
So for now, we will let you guys go. Thank you so much for joining us. We love each and every one of you. Hopefully we will see you Tuesday night with Neoma Finn.
And if anybody wants to get a hold of us, contact us at midwestnightwatchers@gmail.com. Send us an email, tell us some stories, and we'll read them on the air if you want us to. If you want to stay anonymous, we'll read them for you without your name. Or if you just want to share something with you, we don't have to share it at all. We just love reading and hearing your guys' experiences. So please send us some emails. Hit the like button. Subscribe to our channel if you're new here. Go to Steve's channel. And like I said, coming up, we got Neoma Finn. So go to her channel and check her out. And we'll see you guys all next week or Tuesday.
Yep. Keep looking up.
Keep looking up. Love you guys.
And raise your vibrations.